We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to eradicating human slavery, human trafficking, child exploitation, and child sexual abuse material through disrupting networks and applying data, technology, and advanced analytics and intelligence.
We have an esteemed panel today that I'm thrilled to moderate, seeing some familiar faces and getting to meet some new ones for the first time. My name's Paul, and I'm head of sales and customer success at Clain, which is a blockchain investigation tool that works with private companies like exchanges and law enforcement agencies to investigate crimes potentially committed with digital currencies. This is the Blockchain Intelligence Perspective for the 2023 Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative Summit. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the panel for their introductions. Don't all jump at once.
I'll start off. Mike Fasanello, Crypto Compliance Officer for Anchain.ai, Web3 security and risk management firm. Spent 10 years in the federal government, from everywhere from DOJ, asset forfeiture, money laundering, to Treasury, OFAC sanctions, and FinCEN, dealing with Bank Secrecy Act, and caught the crypto bug a couple years back, and really changed my perspective on compliance and investigations in traditional finance, and then how that's evolved with the evolution of digital assets. So,
thanks.
Thanks for having me.
I'll jump in if you want. Bill Callahan from Blockchain Intelligence Group. Like Paul, Mike said, we're another blockchain analytics company working with private industry, financial investigators, law enforcement, law firms, merchants who deal in crypto. Primarily, we have three big ticket items that we're doing here. One, supporting those financial investigators and law enforcement with a tool to track and trace cryptocurrency transactions. Second thing, for financial institutions or merchants who are dealing in crypto, is transaction monitoring. And the third thing is education, which is a big piece that we're getting out there with our different education programs and courses, including the Certified Cryptocurrency Investigator course. Myself, I came out of law enforcement over 20 some odd years in the DOJ, retiring from the Drug Enforcement Administration, where I primarily did financial investigations, developed policies in cryptocurrency, and was involved in some of the early investigations as far as developing policies and procedures how to handle cryptocurrency.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, I am Jonelle Still, Director of Crypto Investigations and Intelligence at Ciphertrace by Mastercard. Going into my fourth year now with Ciphertrace. Similar to Mike, I also caught the bug a few years ago while I was in grad school, coming out of the US Air Force, and I've contracted for DOJ, and like I said, been with Ciphertrace now for a few years. Ciphertrace, we're a blockchain analytics firm. We also provide certifications in blockchain tracing and understanding your crypto risk and crypto risk exposure. We are currently excited to announce Crypto Secure, which is a way for FIs to understand their crypto exposure and crypto risk on chain as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. So before we even begin this call, we're discussing a scam that's almost as old as time, but one that has a new spin on it thanks to a fancy new name, and that's pig butchering, a new form of romance scam that's spreading and becoming more top of mind for a lot of centralized exchanges and businesses. On our end, what's been really interesting to see as we look through some of the data that's out there, we're finding that companies have tools integrated within their scam software that helps try to muddy or hide the initial source or destination of funds that they're receiving. And they do that by integrating chip mixers within their criminal scam extortion dashboard that they have. So we're seeing from open source information that we're purchasing and finding ourselves that criminals might brag and say, hey, look at this, I ransomed or I scammed this person out of X amount of money. This is how I'm going to put it into this mixer. And then from there, I'm going to be able to more cleanly send it and spend it. Have you guys seen recently any sort of advances or new technology or new pieces in your investigation that are surprising to you? And what do you guys think that your company specifically is doing to address these and try and investigate? I know from our point of view, finding ways to investigate mixed transaction and demixed transactions and more finally locate the source and destinations of funds is very, very top of mind and important for us, because in our mind, the most important step going forward is being able to produce evidence that's issuing subpoenas that leads to evidence in court that ultimately leads to arrest and convictions.
So I wanted to give everybody a chance to hop in, but so I'll start off by noting that I think the traditional romance scam, which has now evolved into this pig butchering involving cryptocurrencies, it's being enabled by smart contracts. I know we talked about that a little bit prior to recording, and it's something that Anchain AI has been sort of like leading the charge and focusing on analyzing smart contracts, breaking them down for investigators, because investigators a lot of the time don't have all the technical subject matter expertise to really understand what's going on, particularly when it comes to computer coding. Like, you do have your your analysts or your certain experts in the field. They're fairly rare, I think, in terms of like the full gamut of law enforcement officers. I'm sure Bill can provide context on that, but it's tough when you've got a very, very few people that really understand something niche like coding and engineering and developing. And so the additional obfuscation that we're seeing by programmable smart contracts, which basically make it an automatic process from scamming the victim, washing the funds, mixing the funds, to chain hopping, chain peels, or peel chains, I should say. All those different things that were once a very manual process can now be wrapped up into this smart contract and basically deployed on a continuing basis to assist the perpetrators in kind of obscuring the trail for investigators. So it's a very unique niche piece of what's going on now in the industry.
Yeah, I'll jump in and give a little more context and talk maybe from the law enforcement perspective. I think that when we met a year ago and maybe a year before that, a lot of agencies were still coming up to speed with cryptocurrency, with how to investigate crypto, just having that basic knowledge. I think the tools have also advanced to a great degree, where definitely it's become as the easier to track and trace, which means the bad guys, as always, will start to adapt and get more creative in their ways to obfuscate, like Mike said, either through many of the various mechanisms that they can do that. One of the things in talking scams, when Paul, you first mentioned it, which got me thinking about, what we also have to do is look at this criminal element. And we're also talking about money laundering here, something I like to call crime as a service. So we also need to be thinking of, as investigators, that especially if we're taking something like human trafficking or romance scams, there's going to be different players involved in this. So maybe, just trying to think of something which I've done in the past, like the drug trafficking, right? We are combating it for everything from the grower, supplier to the transporter, right? These are all different services that are being provided. So as the investigators are conducting their investigation, they're looking at these different services that are provided, and maybe the person who's providing it is never touching, the actual human trafficking overt acts, but they're touching the money laundering piece of it as well. Or you can put that same concept into these scams as well. So you need to be looking at these investigations from that perspective of who are these different players and what roles, and they may not have the whole piece, right? They've compartmentalized this overall crime into these different pieces, which is good if you're in the U.S. where you have conspiracy laws, you can wrap them up into the bigger scheme of things.
Yeah, Bill. I think I appreciate what you just said. I think talking about the stakeholders within this sort of supply chain, supply and demand of with respect to trafficking in particular, but with this transnational organizations, human trafficking might just be one aspect of the business model. If there is supply chain or a way to traffic, there's probably a way to and launder those funds. There's a way to traffic drugs, wildlife, minerals, et cetera, which we know from traditional finance. So, yeah, definitely there are. I think the same ways that in the same methods we see criminals get away or launder funds from the proceeds of these types of crimes in TradFi. We see this the same in cryptocurrency, digital asset space. Caveat, of course, with what Mike mentioned, in using these smart contracts that sort of auto execute the process for the criminal organizations that do have the knowledge and understanding to do that, right? So at some point they've got to hire a developer or two or three to make that possible. So there might be one additional piece in here, I think that Mike was pointing out, that might make this unique or separate or differentiate that out from TradFi. That said, at Ciphertrace, at Mastercard, we're really focused on, what we've learned is that cryptocurrency, digital assets, all of that money laundering in these asset types start and end at financial institutions. And so being able to identify those red flag indicators of trafficking in human beings, of money laundering in general. And again, those same indicators in TradFi would apply to crypto as well. So coming up with providing that transaction monitoring, right, that Bill mentioned, providing like services like Crypto Secure that allow FIs to identify their crypto risk and understand exactly who their customers are engaged with, and then the risk of that particular payment processor, for example. So that's really important to have eyes on, for FIs to have eyes on their customers and their customers' uses, if they are using cryptocurrency or involved in any way in the digital asset space. Another thing that Ciphertrace does with respect to this financial grooming or Shajupan, a couple of years ago, we didn't have that term. We didn't understand necessarily that that's what we were seeing. But we had, over 4,000 cases within just a few months. And I think 75% of those cases, or just over 2/3 of those cases, all had really similar typologies, right? They looked like a romance scam. Most of them looked like a romance scam. They were all some type of investment scam that involved meeting a stranger, becoming comfortable with this person, and over a period of a few months, which could extend to maybe max 6 months, being exploited for financial gain. And after a course of investigations, we found out that this was terming the financial grooming or the Shajupan, right? Which a majority that our data sets show us were romance scams. So the same types of romance scams you're going to see in TradFi definitely also apply to the blockchain as well.
Yeah, Jonelle, I think you brought up a couple of good points. One in particular is these transnational criminal organizations, right? And that's something that I think our viewers would appreciate knowing some more about. What are these organizations capable of? And have you seen, like I've seen in my past, in my experiences, these organizations are involved in multiple criminal activities, if it's not, it could be human smuggling, human trafficking, two different things, drug trafficking, or some others. I mean, maybe that's something maybe not only seeing in this current position, maybe in your prior position, but just a little bit on those TCOs.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's fascinating, right? The four of us are fortunate that we all have access to these tracing tools, right? With attribution that allows us to see who controls these digital wallets, right? Who controls these addresses? Who owns these private keys? So while we don't identify individual wallets, unless, of course, they're directly related to scam, fraud, or some criminal activity or illicit activity, we can see the connections on chain between what Bill just mentioned, these like multiple threads of crime. So, for example, we've seen connections between ransomware and trafficking. We've seen connections between ransomware and dark markets, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe Mike, you were nodding. You had a couple examples too.
Yeah, I was thinking that it's an indulgence to have such easy access to the blockchain analytics, especially with the wide variety of prices they have out there. It's something that I think probably for the victim, it's almost insurmountable to be able to do your own work in this area. And it just reminded me that another scam that sort of comes out of the pig butchering is the re-victimization of the victims by other scammers going under the banner of asset recovery. Now, I just had a talk about 20 minutes ago with a gentleman who is in the private sector. He does private investigations, and one of the challenges he had was when he's trying to deal with law enforcement. If they don't outright not understand the Web3 space, the blockchain enabled financial crime and things like that, they sometimes can be very suspicious of private sector investigators trying to assist victims in asset recovery, because it's like, how much should we be charging for these services where you may or may not actually be able to recover anything? And is that really helping the person or just victimizing them again? But I think that, those services that are out there wearing the white hat, doing the right job, charging a nominal fee and being transparent with the victim and saying, hey, there's pieces of this where we have our expertise because we have our licenses for blockchain analytics and tracing and things like that. We can help you find where your money is now and tag it, for continuously monitoring to see if it's going to go to a compliant choke point where law enforcement can then do a freeze and seize on it through the legal process. But it's a partnership. It is largely a partnership between private sector, public sector, and even the victim in giving you contextual things that you don't know from the blockchain analytics, right? Like, some of these victims, they'll have like a SIM swapping situation, or they'll get scammed by some cell phone that eventually is traced out to a different area of the United States or a different area of the world based on VPN or IP address. And so a lot of the things that we don't have part and parcel with the blockchain analytics can be further informed by speaking with the victims, like the IP addresses, phone numbers, things like that. Those are all very helpful contextual tools, off-chain information that can really help the investigators to sort of put together the pieces of these puzzles. It's always a puzzle, and it's always neat to see the different collaboration between local, state, and federal, then local, state, and federal pairing with private sector pairing with the victim. It's just one big team effort to try to sort of combat these crimes they're just happening more and more and easier and easier through the emergence of this new technology that's real-time, weightless, borderless. And so I was just thinking, as you mentioned, how privileged we are to actually have access to the blockchain intel part of it. There are other parts of it that they really help just expand the effect that those powerful tools can actually have in trying to make some of these people either entirely or partially whole from being victimized. So.
Yeah, and I think piggybacking off that, it's important to commemorate the organizations that go across border that do a job with the information sharing. If the criminal organizations are multinational, the enforcement agencies need to have an open line of communication to understand what's going on and eventually catch these guys. So organizations like the ATCC, the Complaint Center for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Of course, ACAMS does some phenomenal work as well across border. Do you guys have anything to share about your work with these organizations, or maybe any others I didn't mention, and getting information from what you guys discover to reporting it? I know for us, we maintain a large OSINT database that's impossible to get through, so we're working on scanning and seeing what we can discover. And in addition to discovering crypto scams, we've discovered a lot of things related to like PPP loan scams or other sort of identity fraud scams. So we do our best to report those to the appropriate authorities as quickly as possible. For us personally, I know we've assisted in active and ongoing cases relating to the Lazarus Group, online ransomware gang that, like I said, will hack into a company's mainframe or their database and hold the company hostage and their ability to do business unless they, like you said, issue a payment that eventually goes into a smart contract or a mixer that may appear to be clean from that point over. But of course, we'll do the best we can to trace and find those. So do any of you guys have anything to share about working with the appropriate authorities, or if anyone wants to learn more information about those guys, where they can look up?
Yeah, Mastercard works with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I imagine a few of you guys do as well, supporting them in education and joining their financial intelligence group as well on those meetings. We also work like similar to Bill. We work with civil society and education. I think this is really important, a really important piece, working with these different NGOs. ATIIS, working with the OSCE, that's in Europe, in Vienna. They meet annually to discuss trafficking in human beings. And this year they are focused on national responses. So that's the theme for this year's event. And that's something we attend and provide insights, if asked, on what we're seeing on chain. For example, a partner law enforcement agency in another jurisdiction used our tool and was able to, he was kind of like a first-time tracer, as I understand, and was using our tool and was able to trace back to the source of funds, to this payment, and ultimately a child was rescued who had been trafficked. And that payment source originated at a cryptocurrency kiosk. So, and not to say negative things about kiosks, many of them have made massive strides in recent years in compliance, which is critical. Here in my area where I live, I've sort of, as a hobby, I go around and I check out different kiosks. If I'm traveling, I'll check out different kiosks and see what their compliance is, right? In my area, all of the kiosks require some form of KYC. Some of them only allow you to purchase with debit cards, so no cash. Some of them force you to download an app, connect your bank account, or confirm your identity, upload your government issued ID, and create an account before actually being able to withdraw the money. So perhaps there's a process where you can deposit money, but then at a certain point, you'll need to, if you want to withdraw that money or move that money, you will need to sign up for an account and go through some type of KYC process. So definitely far improved in the last few years. But that's something Ciphertrace does, is we really focus on the educational piece with civil society and public sector.
Yeah, to follow up on you point, Jonelle, the education piece, and I'm actually listening to you talk. It's good to hear your experience or your observations about the ATMs, the Bitcoin ATMs, because that seems to be the largest starting point. There's probably not a week goes by, right, or maybe even a day or two goes by where we get the phone call, where we probably all get the phone call either from a random state and local officer, or a victim, or a family member of a victim, and that story starts out with my mother, father, whoever it was, son, daughter, was instructed due to this scam to go to a Bitcoin ATM and deposit money and make transfers to this address which they give us. And it's really important that we are able to jump in that early It's also important, which I find is that, police reports are taken early on, so at least some basic evidence can be collected. We'll hear these stories, months later, 6, 7 months, maybe 12 months later. Some evidence is gone now. Any evidence that's on chain, yes, we'll be able to see that, and be able to quickly get that. And I think which is important also for the human trafficking community that's joining us today to understand that difference, that when we're talking this analytics, and all of us here, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but what we're seeing is with the activity that's on chain. And that's real important because there is a lot of activity that happens off chain or may happen at an exchange, where somebody could cash out or change. So, what I believe Mike you talked about is, yes, there is that partnership, not only between our companies, the partnership with the exchanges to be able to tell them, hey, these funds came in here. What happened on your side? And then maybe they did come out. Maybe they came out in fiat. Okay, and now that's where you bring law enforcement in to be able to serve subpoenas on the traditional finance, the banks, to find out, to continue on. These are financial investigations, plain and simple, right? Yes, there's some little more complexity, maybe, but it's not insurmountable, especially having a tool like Blockchain Intelligence Group or any of the other panelists here today, where you're able to see through where that's happening. But you must think of it as a financial investigation, where the monies in this instance go from a digital and maybe go into a fiat world, which happens off chain, right? And that's where you'll need law enforcement to get involved, issue subpoenas, interviewing people, knocking on some doors there, just like any other traditional investigation.
Yes, make no mistake, the US dollar is still the currency used to launder most.
True. And Paul, I think that's what you're asking early on is, that international, which again, I've always said this, I probably said in the last one, right? The criminal element has all the time in the world, they have all the resources, and they're not bound by jurisdiction. And when you compare that to law enforcement, right? Law enforcement, you don't have all the resources in the world. At some point, you are bound by a jurisdiction. Now, you can hopefully get to a jurisdiction where you have relationships. Some places we do, some places better. There are still places in the world where money laundering, you try to sell them that as a crime, and they're not going to look at that like we look at money laundering, say, in the States or in places like Europe. That was always a big challenge when I was with DEA conducting financial investigations. The money would be laundered to some country, and that country really wasn't interested in money laundering because it didn't affect them, right? Maybe it passed through, or maybe they were conduit. So those are some of the challenges. But remember, the bad guys, they're going to have the time, they're going to have the resources, they're going to have the people that study this, especially like as Jonelle mentioned earlier, which is really some key component here to understand. If it's drug trafficking, human trafficking, these are being done by these transnational criminal organizations. This isn't done by one or two people. These are complex organizations that are doing this kind of these bad acts.
Yeah, and I think you guys made great points in discussing the ongoing importance of education. I personally am seeing a growth of more private organizations focused on acting as outsourced consultants or trainers for this sort of investigative stuff, and then also acting as a conduit between the victims and a more public and larger platform. Because I think a big portion of the population may not fully understand the amount of crime that is going on through these means. And going forward, I think education is beyond introducing crypto and what it is. Now we're getting pretty advanced in some of the subject matter. I'd be interested to hear, as kind of a closing topic from everyone here, what are the biggest topics that you think law enforcement and the general public need to be educated on when it comes to potential crimes in addition to human trafficking through crypto?
Jump in there. Okay, I'll jump in on that one. So Paul, the question was more about law enforcement challenges or the general public challenges?
I would say both. For what do you think there needs to be more education on? We're beyond general introduction. We're beyond the, like Michael said, we have pretty advanced turnkey tools for scamming and hiding the proceeds of funds. So what are the main topics you think generally compliance officers as well as investigators and agencies need to make sure they're learning and readying up on?
Yeah, I mean, make no mistake. I still think that I still hear from law enforcement in the field on a regular basis the need for a basic understanding. Like I always said with our training program, what is crypto? How does it work? How does the bad guy use it? How do I investigate it? Right, as the investigators, kind of those four things. That is still continuous. That need there, which is nice to see. Remember, as a younger generation now takes these positions in law enforcement, as special agents, as investigators, financial crime investigators, detectives, whatever it may be, they are more comfortable. And I think that was part of the challenge. This is part of the challenge I had, right? I didn't understand what this digital currency, right? I didn't, still trying to figure out, banking on the telephone. But when I speak in front of a group, if we're doing training for law enforcement or speak in front of a group, now I'm in a room where I can see the young detectives, the young analysts versus kind of the older detective or financial investigators in the room. This younger generation, they don't use banks, right? They haven't been inside a bank. They don't write checks. So that is helping overcome that, I guess, that fear of what is the digital currency, what is digital banking. Awareness. I think we all have this role to play for the general public for awareness. I think in the human trafficking field, we've seen this change where now you go to a hotel and there might be a sticker in a or a poster in an elevator, kind of reaching out to a victim, because we know that these hotels and motels are used to traffic victims or to exploit victims. So you'll see airlines now that are identifying. We hear more and more stories about airline employees who are recognizing possibly a victim who's on that plane of human trafficking and kind of notifying the ground before they get there. So even with crypto awareness, like Jonelle had mentioned, which I look at when I see these machines, what I'm looking for are signs and warning signs around there, or I'm looking for the employees in these bodegas and delis, where these machines are located. Have they been trained to identify, hey, you see somebody that doesn't look right standing in front of a machine? Are we going to tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, everything okay? Or, can I help you? And try to get a story out of them. Why are they there? Because many of them are there because they fear for an arrest, or they think something happened because they got some phone call. And these fishing expeditions, right? They are the PH fishing, very sophisticated, very multi-layered, and very believable. So those are some of the things, the challenge there. But again, education is definitely something, and then being able to, which we try to do on a daily basis, is get the tool in someone's hand and use it.
Yeah, to follow up on what Bill was saying in terms of the different ways, the education is important. In the subject is like, for example, the fundamentals of blockchain, fundamentals of cryptocurrency, introduction to Web3. These are all super important. From the baseline to start to onboard investigators, old and new, into this area, so they can be, as impactful as possible in both investigating the crimes and assisting the victims, as well as just clearing the cases, because it's part of what they do as law enforcement. Is the more impact they can have, the better. I mean, nobody's ever going to eradicate crime, but the more you can deter it and disrupt it, the more you can seize assets and then prevent criminals from using those assets to buy more toys or to facilitate their nefarious operations. You're having a big impact. I think the challenge here is twofold. So first is the rate at which this technology is advancing sometimes makes it difficult to stay on top of the newest technology, the most complex subjects and things like that. So it's important, like Bill was saying, when he speaks in front of people or trains a group, and we do the same thing at Anchain, is listen to your investigators, listen to what questions they're asking, because those will tell you, because they're seeing the crime. So, you know, you may think, oh, well, we want to teach people this. But if you actually listen to what questions they're asking, it can point you in the direction of where you really need to be educating. So for us at Anchain, we realized a lot of the investigators, particularly the youthful ones that are like, you know, blockchain and crypto, digital assets, this is natural. This is natural to them. And I'm even getting to the age where like I'm starting to find that where I thought I was like technologically advanced, now people are like that are younger than I are so far more advanced than I am. So like we would get a lot of questions about smart contracts and DeFi and things like that. And I like to think I'm, you know, a sharp guy, and I know a lot about this technology and the methodologies that it's, you know, used to enable financial crime. But sometimes they just ask questions that I don't have an answer to. And it's a humbling moment when you have a student ask you something that you don't know. You're supposed to be there giving them expertise, and they ask you something, or you're just like, I don't know. Some people try to parlay that, try to dance around it. I'm just a straight shooting guy, so I just like to say, you know, that's a great question. I don't know, and I'm going to talk to our people and get back to you, because that's a really great question. And so we had enough of these about DeFi and smart contracts that it made sense for us to have a smart contracts module. So we just launched that actually this week. Anchain University launched a fourth module. We had fundamentals of smart contracts, but this one is smart contracts for investigators. And where I thought that the fundamentals of smart contracts was challenging when we were developing this investigative module, I really finally found out how much I don't know about, you know, smart contracts and the way they're really leveraged, you know, by nefarious actors. So, you know, it was a humbling moment to start to kind of go from being, you know, so much of the, I don't want to even say subject matter expert, because we're all subject matter practitioners. This stuff, it evolves, you know, on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. You know, if you miss 3 days of crypto news, it's like you missed 3 years. So, you know, when people call us subject matter experts, it's almost laughable. But it was really humbling to see how much our experts that are developers, coders, backend engineers, how much they know about this technology, and then to actually sort of walk their path as to how they do a smart contracts investigation, break down the code, you know, into all the different calls. They're called calls, so you can see what's actually happening. Like they have the line of code, we can break it down with our screen tool, and then you can actually see, well, if so-and-so sends their funds to this address, it's going to trigger this mixer to mix those funds, shoots it off to a stealth address, starts a appeal chain, all this incredible stuff that I'm just blown away by. So it's really, it's just, it's not to beat a dead horse, but it's really important to be open to that role of always learning, so that you can adapt to the changes, because your students will ask questions that can really inform what they need to know now, and like how that's going to change things around the corner. So all of our companies can really figure out the best way to enable them with technology, but also to enable them with that education.
Yeah, wow. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, that's a lot there. I would, yeah, absolutely agree. And kind of jumping off of, I think, what you just said, and talking specifically about what your team is capable of. Kudos to you guys. And I would extend, I think, Paul's question, not only to investigators and law enforcement, to the courts as well. Something we do is expert witness testimony, providing affidavits, and we'll go to court and testify. And our data is can be backed up. So we've got that whole attribution on all of our data. We have the date, the source, when we acquired it, and when we can provide that to court if the court requests it. So I think kind of just jumping off of what Mike said, understanding what your tool can do for you and its limitations. I think this is a really important question, and will become an even more important question, not only for law enforcement and investigators, but for courts as well, including you know, prosecutors and all attorneys, defense attorneys, is understanding the source data, the source of that attribution, how it was obtained, when it was obtained, which tool was used, how was the tool used, is there any black box there? Can that be explained, or can that not be explained? So what I have been seeing is these questions are getting asked more and more, and this is good. This is a good thing, because this I think just kind of lifts or elevates the entire field, right? And the knowledge and expertise that is required, right? Because when we're talking about prosecuting a case and providing expert witness testimony for that, we have to really make sure we are providing the best data for it and the best analysis that we possibly can with the information we've been provided at that time. So what I have been seeing is some law enforcement agencies will be using 1 tool, 2 tools, 3 tools, right? And then in addition to that, verifying with, if possible, using other free or open source tools like Etherscan. They'll deep dive into those smart contracts there. They'll use other like blockchain.com, right? If we're talking about UTXO-based cryptos, to be able to verify the actual flow of funds and all addresses that participate in a particular transaction. Some of our tools do some really cool things where they kind of condense down that information and make it super simple and easy to see, right? And from a court perspective, oftentimes that's just easiest to explain, right? For an attorney, look, circle, line, circle, there goes the money. Very super simple, and that's great. But if there are more addresses involved, if there's more things happening behind the scene than than what looks like to be only 1 or 2 transactions, I think that's something that the courts are becoming more aware of, and that will need to be addressed in court. So I would encourage new investigators, law enforcement, and courts, and any attorneys on the call listening in today to really start to deep dive into your tools, understand how they work, hire some of these experts, right? You've got 4 panelists here, right, with deep expertise, and they're part of teams that do consulting as well. Ask for a consultant, get consulting on some of these free and open source tools as well, and to understand their strengths and limitations.
I think that's very well said, and a great opportunity to wrap this up. Do you guys have any closing remarks you'd like to share? Well, with that, then, thank you guys so much for joining, and I'll be looking forward to running into you guys at the conferences over the next couple of months.
All right, Paul, thanks so much for having us.
Thank you, Paul.
Looking
Thanks
forward
also.
to it.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, Paul.
And you.